Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of Gut Instinct podcast. I'm recording in the daytime today, guys, which feels very exciting because usually I just have low mood lighting at night time, and today we have natural light, which feels great. Very positive, good omen. I also have Keisha here with me. I don't really know why I've decided to have her here, but she's here. She's here for the ride. She's happy to be here. Today we are talking relationships and Crohn's, so romantic relationships and friendships, because relationships are a big part of anybody's life. Like, we all have friends. A lot of us have or have had like romantic partners, but adding Crohn's into the mix can just make things that little bit more difficult. You can feel a lot more vulnerable and misunderstood at times as well, especially if you're dealing with people who don't really know what Crohn's is. And it can just make it that little bit more difficult. And I don't see anybody talking about this. Maybe they do, maybe I just don't do extensive research. But I hardly see anybody talk about it, and it's such an important thing to talk about. So here I am to speak about it. So let's start with romantic relationships and dating. So okay, this part can be quite hard at times because like Crohn's is such like an intimate disease and it can be quite hard to talk about. Like it affects you in ways that are just hard to talk about. I personally don't really have much of a problem with this because I've said this before, but I'm such an open person. Like I share way too many details about my life with people. Details that I probably shouldn't share. But it can affect you in ways that are really hard to talk about, even with people that you trust. If you're in a relationship, I'd like to think that you trust that person, but it can still be hard to talk about with them. I've never personally found that having Crohn's has had too much of an impact. It's never really been too much of an issue for me in like my dating life, or if you're my family, please can you skip about 5 seconds ahead. I've never found it to be a problem in my kind of intimate life, you know? It's never really been an issue. I've never really had anyone be horrible to me about it, but it can be an issue and it is an issue for other people. I've actually got some follower stories to share at the end, which are absolutely heartbreaking because it's not something that you can change, it's not something that you choose to have. If anything, I'd be choosing not to have it. And the fact that some people have had such negative experiences with dating and having this illness, it just breaks my heart because it's a part of you, you know? And the fact that people can have a negative opinion over something that you can't change, it doesn't really make any sense to me, to be honest. But yeah. So there's always the question of when do you tell someone about your diagnosis? So you've not got to bring it up on the very first date, unless you want to, of course, you do you. But it's not something that you should have to bring up on the first date. But you also don't want to wait until it's unavoidable. You don't want to wait until you have like a sudden flare up and then you have to explain the whole thing with the stress of a flare up and the stress of what their reaction might be. I don't think that's a very good idea. It's always best to just tell them early, not too early, but at a time when you feel comfortable with this person enough to tell them. So after a few dates, when you kind of can see that things might be progressing into something serious, is always a good time. For me, I told my current boyfriend, I think I told him around the fourth date. And again, the reason I told him then was because I could kind of sense that things were getting a bit more serious. We'd been on a few dates, things were looking good. I enjoyed spending time with him, and I wanted him to know. I was also in quite a bad flare up at the time as well, at the time of meeting him. So it did make things a bit easier to tell him. Not that I really have a problem with telling people because I'm so open about it, but yeah, I told him around the fourth date kind of mark, and it was so easy. I'm pretty sure the way I told him was that I think we were having like a random conversation, and I can't even remember what the conversation was about, but I remember saying to him, "Oh, do you know what Crohn's disease is?" And he actually said, "Yeah," which was good because it meant I didn't have to explain it. And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, I have that." And he was like, "Okay, cool." Obviously, he didn't say, "Okay, cool," but my point is that it was a very that was it. Like it wasn't a problem. He didn't ask any questions, and it was really easy. And I feel very lucky to have had that experience because I know that obviously not everybody has that experience, and it's not as easy for other people. So yeah, I would say that timing does matter, but there's never going to be a perfect time to tell somebody. It's just all about when you feel comfortable enough. But I would recommend around the fourth date, fifth date mark. But again, completely up to you. You know this relationship better than anybody else. So, how do you tell a possible partner about you having Crohn's or colitis? You've not got to sit there and give them a full medical history straight away. You know, you've not got to like get up your NHS app, get up all your hospital letters. It doesn't have to be like that at all. Start with the basics, and if they want more details, if they ask questions, then you give as much detail as you want. So you could say something so simple, do what I did, and say, "Oh, do you know what Crohn's is?" They give their answer, and then you say, "Okay, well, I have it." It doesn't have to be like a really long winded conversation, and keep it casual, keep it just as if you were sharing another random fact about yourself. Keep it like that because it makes it a lot easier for you, and it also makes it a lot easier for the other person to take in because I feel like it can probably be quite a difficult thing to hear, you know? So keeping it casual, again, just like you're sharing any other normal facts about yourself, is definitely the way to go. So you could say something like, "Oh, by the way, I have Crohn's. It's a condition that affects my stomach." And that's that. And it can be that easy. It doesn't have to be a hard thing. I know it can feel very daunting, but it really doesn't have to be. Most people won't know what Crohn's is. Like, you'd you'd be surprised. A lot of people that I have told about me having Crohn's have actually said, "Oh yeah, I have someone in my family who has that too." And it always really surprises me because I feel like when I got diagnosed, I didn't know what it was, so I was like, "Oh, it's really unknown." It's actually not as unknown as a lot of people think, but a lot of people won't know what it is beyond like a vague idea. So when explaining it to somebody, focus on how it affects you as a person and not the whole extensive NHS list of symptoms. Focus on how it affects your own daily life and how you struggle with it rather than, again, explaining every single symptom because chances are there's so many symptoms of Crohn's, chances are you probably don't experience them all, or maybe you do. But focus just on how it impacts you. So, for example, you could say, "Sometimes I have to be careful about what I eat, and I might have to cancel plans if I'm not feeling very well." And that's that. Again, doesn't have to be something really long winded. It can be really, really simple. Keeping it simple will just make sure that you're not overwhelming the other person because, again, it can be a hard thing to hear and they might not understand. And giving them so much information as well, especially when you don't really know each other that well, if you're telling them early on, that is, it can just be quite an overwhelming thing. So keep it as simple as you can is definitely the way to go. Another thing is being open and honest about the challenges of Crohn's without apologizing. You know, it's so like it's absolutely okay to acknowledge that Crohn's is difficult and that it's a daily struggle. But at the same time, you shouldn't explain it and label it as something that they have to put up with, as if it's like something that's really going to get in the way. Because chances are it's not going to get in the way all the time. You can just be as open as possible, as open as you want, about how it affects you and how you struggle with it. If somebody really cares about you and wants to progress into a relationship, then they will want to support you through it. And if they don't, get them gone. You deserve better than that. It's you can say to someone, it can be quite unpredictable. I might have to cancel plans. There might be times where we can't do things and we might have to change plans, and that's okay. You shouldn't have to apologize for that because again, it's something that you can't change. Another thing is, okay, so after you've told them about your illness, give them a chance and space to process what you've said because, again, I'm going to repeat myself again, but it can be a difficult thing to hear. And let them ask questions. If they have questions about how it affects you in like all the aspects of your life, answer as in as much or as little detail as you want. You don't have to give full details. It Yeah. A lot of people probably won't have questions. For me, when I've told people, I've never really been questioned a lot, other than like, oh, what is that? Or how does it affect you? A good thing to kind of say, if they seem a bit shocked, you could say something like, I know it might be a lot to take in, but if you've got any questions, I'm here to answer them. And that'll make them feel a lot more comfortable. Just reassure them, and reassure them that you're not expecting them to care for you or have all the answers or take it away. Just knowing that they're there to support you is enough. If they have questions, then I would say that's a good thing. But at the same time, if they react with judgment, if they're like, oh, what is that? Or what the hell? That's probably a red flag and probably a sign that this isn't going to work. You want to feel as supported as possible by a partner, but especially when you have Crohn's. So, yeah, if somebody responds poorly as well, that says so much more about them than you. I can't stress that enough. Because, again, it's something that you can't change. And if someone's not willing to support you through something that's so difficult, get them gone. You deserve better than that. If Okay, so keeping the kind of conversation around Crohn's, keeping it open is such an important thing. You've not got to like cover every single detail at once. Again, when you first tell them, you can keep it very, very simple. They might not have any questions, or they might. But if they ask more questions over time, it shows that they care. It shows that they want to know more about it and they want to support you and they want to know how to support you. So you could say to somebody, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. If you don't have any right now, then that's fine. If you have any in a few weeks or a few days, ask me. Because, again, if they have questions, then it shows that they care. And keeping the conversation open, it's just healthy, because there'll be times in a relationship where things get hard and you both have to deal with it. So keeping it open is a great thing. So another thing that I wanted to talk about is body image issues, especially when, again, if you're my family, please skip this part, especially when being intimate. I have personally struggled with this because obviously you can get weight loss and weight gain, especially when you get put on medication. Like for me, I am currently on steroids. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I'm currently on prednisolone, and I have gained some weight, and it has affected the way that I see myself. I have tried my hardest to not let it affect that part of my life, and it hasn't affected it too much. But if you've not got like the best image of yourself and you don't really like the way you look, especially when you've put on weight, and I hear this from so much people, like when your weight is going up and down, you're often gonna have like an up and down view of yourself, and it's not great, and it can make intimacy very, very hard. But communicating that and keeping an open conversation is the best way to go, because if your partner is properly there to support you, then it won't be an issue for them. Another thing, don't ever assume that somebody knows how to help you in a relationship. Okay? You have to communicate. If something's not right, or you're struggling with something, communicate it. And I know that might be like such, like a common knowledge thing, like communication. Yeah, it is. But you have to communicate. You can't just sit there and expect somebody to know what's wrong, because unless you tell them, how will they know? Communication is so important anyway in a relationship, but especially with Crohn's, especially when the other person doesn't have Crohn's. Communication is so important. If you need help or you need support, you need them to come to the hospital with you, you need to talk about something, communicate it, because otherwise you're going to dwell on it, and how will they ever know? And it won't get any better. Not that, talking about it will take it away, but it just makes it so much easier. So, communication is absolute key, always in a relationship anyway, but especially with Crohn's. Okay, let's move on to friendships. So, I feel like a lot of what I've just said can also go for friendships. You know, there's like, especially like, how and when do you tell your friends that you have Crohn's? Again, for me, when I came to uni, that's when I've made friends. I didn't really have any friends before I came to uni, but um, when I came to uni, I met like such a lovely group of people. And again, I'm such an open person, so I found it so easy to just tell them I have Crohn's. And I probably have told people when I've been drunk on a night out. I'll be so real. Um, it's never been an issue. But I feel like telling your friends can probably be a bit more difficult, especially with like the uni lifestyle, with like going out. If you don't want to drink because of your Crohn's, it can be quite a hard thing to explain. But again, it's about keeping it simple and saying, guys, look, I have Crohn's or colitis. This is what's up. Um, and yeah, it doesn't have to be such a difficult thing. Although I can so really, really understand why some people would be a bit hesitant to tell people, but it really doesn't have to be hard. So, with friendships, there's a bit of like a guilt cycle with like cancelling plans and stuff, which is something that I do very often. I will hold up my hands and say that I cancel plans so much because I'm either just not feeling well, I'm too tired, I'm just not feeling up to it. Especially more at the moment as well, being on steroids, with how it's affected me mentally. I have very little energy all the time and have cancelled a lot of plans, which I feel so bad about. But again, it's a guilt cycle because you finally feel well enough to make plans with somebody. You know, you've had a great few days of being symptom free, you feel great. And then the day of, either your stomach acts up, you feel too tired, or you're just not feeling up to it, and then you have to cancel. And it's the worst feeling ever because then I'm like, oh, well, maybe they're not going to invite me anymore if they might just think that I'm going to cancel. But real friends will not do that. Real friends who actually care about you will always invite you to things and make sure that you feel included, even if you don't go. And even if they know that you probably won't go, they will still invite you because at the end of the day, they're your friends and they still love you for who you are. And just because you've cancelled plans doesn't mean you're a bad friend. It can make you feel like a bad friend, especially with cancelling last minute, which is again something that I do quite a lot. Often, especially recently, I've cancelled plans the day of, the day before, an hour before, which it can make you feel like such a bad friend because the other person was probably really looking forward to it and now they have to make other plans with their day because you've cancelled. It can be so hard, but it's not your fault. Your friends are your friends for a reason and they love you, and it's not something that you can control. And if they're real friends, then they will just want to support you and they won't care about you cancelling. They'll just want to make sure that you're okay. Finding supportive friends is such an important thing. My friends are absolutely amazing. Even just from you know, having a quick phone call with one of my friends when I'm not doing so great, or somebody just coming to go on a 5 minute walk with me. I feel so lucky to have the friends that I do. And again, not all of them understand the extent of Crohn's, but they're still so supportive. And yeah, I just feel very lucky. It's great. Not everybody will understand it, and that is absolutely okay. I've had a couple of people say to me that, oh, like, I know you have Crohn's, but I don't really understand what it is. And that's okay. Not everybody's going to get it. And it can feel so difficult, especially with cancelling plans and stuff, if they don't really understand what it is. It can definitely weigh you down a bit, but it's absolutely okay. Not everyone is going to understand it. In my opinion, it's so much better to have a small circle of friends who get it rather than a big circle who won't get it, you know? Like, I would say that I have quite a big circle of friends, but my closest friends all, like, I'm so open with them. We all get it. We all talk about our bowel movements. Sorry, guys, exposing. But, like, it's just so much nicer to have a smaller group of people. So that's also a good place to start. If you've just been diagnosed and you don't know how to tell your friends, tell your closest circle of people, explain it to them, and explain how they can support you, because that will make it so much easier than trying to explain it to like so many people and having everybody aware. Another thing as well, having like a smaller group of people to explain it to means that you can have humor around it, which is great to cope. Like when I was having my flare up and I was in hospital and I was really ill, like me and some of my friends would just message and like laugh about it. I'm not gonna expose my private conversations on here, but there's been times where I've just like messaged my friends like something really random to do with Crohn's, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you know, it's great." Um, it definitely makes it a lot easier to have a small group of people because you can joke about it with like so many things. And yeah, it's just a lot nicer. The right friends will not make you feel guilty for talking about your struggles, cancelling plans, or anything like that. So it is so important to find your people anyway in life, you know? But especially with this, have the right people around you. Makes it a lot easier. So I now have some follower stories from my followers, funnily enough, um, about their experiences with relationships. Most of them are romantic. I think they actually all are in a romantic sense. But this is just an insight into what it's like to be in a relationship with Crohn's. If you have no idea, listen to these. So, from Anonymous. My ex husband said during our divorce that he preferred me being unwell because I needed him more, and when I'm healthy, I'm more independent, so I don't need him to look after me. What? Honestly, when I read this one, I was just like, what? Who acts like that? It actually annoyed me because that's also just really strange of him. And it's just so sad. Why would you prefer somebody being unwell? You know, like, I'm trying to think, can I understand his point of view? I really can't. Like, needing him more when this person is ill. Honestly, my brain is frazzled by that one because I just don't understand how people can act like that. And I'm so sorry that you had to go through that because that's awful. Number two, maybe not a horror story, but when I first met my boyfriend, I remember I was kind of in a rough patch with my belly. So I used to tell him my mum needed me and I had to go home to help her. So I'd make him wait in the car outside while I try and settle my belly again indoors. This one really, again, made me feel sad because it's never something that you should feel like you have to hide. And this person obviously, just wasn't comfortable enough to tell their partner, which was fine because I mean, this person said that it was when they first met their boyfriend. So I'm assuming it was just at the beginning and they weren't comfortable enough. But it's just so sad because it's not something that you can change and it's not something that can be taken away. It's a part of your life, it's part of you, it's something that you have to deal with. And it just makes me feel sad that people feel like they have to hide it and people feel embarrassed about it. Yeah, that one upset me. Number three. I once told a guy I was talking to about my IBD and he flipped out that it wasn't on my dating profile at the time and I should put it on there because it could affect someone else if they have to care for me. Which was just mad, you know? Like, she even said at the bottom, like, I'm not asking anybody to care for me. We're not. You don't get in a relationship to have the other person care for you. Obviously, they should want to when things get tough, but it's not like you go onto like Tinder or Hinge looking for a carer. That's not what it's about. And it's also definitely not something that you should have to put on your dating profile ever because it's a personal thing and there's so many people on these dating apps who are going to see your profile. Chances are you probably don't want the whole world to know that you have Crohn's or colitis. So why should it be on your dating profile? It should not. Unless you want to, of course. But it's not something, it's not a really important detail to be on there. That one was crazy. Number four. I don't have any real horror stories other than my ex boyfriend telling me he wouldn't find me attractive if I had to have stoma surgery because he couldn't imagine being intimate. It was rich coming from someone who also had Crohn's. This one really annoyed me. Also, she said at the end, my current boyfriend is very understanding and lovely about it all, which I'm so glad about. I'm very happy to hear that. But especially the fact that that came from somebody who also had Crohn's, like, I can't wrap my head around that. Because it's always going to be a possibility that of a stoma, you know? That's always going to be a worry for everybody with Crohn's. It's always going to be something that's at the back of your mind, and it's always going to be a possibility. But again, it's not something that you can change. And the fact that this person who also had Crohn's said it to another person, I cannot understand that, because he also has the possibility one day of having a stoma. So what's the issue? You know? And not finding her attractive as well is just mad, because it's not something that is always on show if you have a stoma. I don't have one, but it's not something that's like always out. It's not something like you show off. You don't see it. And obviously I can understand it being maybe a bit of a shock at first when being intimate, but again, it's just something to get used to. And again, I just can't wrap my head around the fact that somebody who had Crohn's said that to another person with Crohn's. It's mental. But yeah, I'm going to try and not get too angry about this. Luckily, we're on the last one now. I didn't realise how angry these would make me. Well, anyway, final one. I don't have any horror stories, but I mentioned to my boyfriend a while ago that someday in the future there might be a possibility of me needing a stoma bag, and he literally said I would break up with you. What? Like, oh, it makes me so angry. Because it's just not, as I've said it so many times, I'll say it again, it's not something that you have control over. And why, if you really love that person, then you'd support them through anything. Why would you break up with them for something that they can't control? It is beyond me. This one also continues. Then he said he would need time to accept it. Okay, that was the last part. Which, okay, I can understand why he would need time to accept it. I would, you know, if if the roles were reversed and it was my boyfriend who had Crohn's and he needed one, I would also probably need time to accept it. But I wouldn't go straight to, oh, I'll break up with you. But that is just because I am a good person and I have empathy. But I just cannot believe that some people have these opinions and these views. If you're in a relationship with someone, you should want to support them. But yeah, they are the stories from my followers. Thank you so much for sharing them. Like, actually, if anybody else has any stories that they want to share or that they will be happy for me to share, please let me know. Message me on Instagram. It'll be in the description. That's the word I'm looking for. Or leave a comment, anything, because I'm so interested by other people's lives with like this relationship stuff as well, but I'm just also interested in how like other people get on with their lives with Crohn's. But yeah, if anybody ever wants to share a story, feel free and I will share it for you. But yeah, I feel like that's a very good place to end this before I get any angrier by reading these stories. So thank you very much for watching. I hope this was helpful. I hope it was enjoyable. And I will see you all in my next episode.